Hello everybody, I am back with another video, and today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. This is not a pickup video or a review or anything of the sort, but I was reading an old Gameinformer magazine recently, which I do actually quite a bit. I have an entire stack of Gameinformer magazines all the way back to 2005, so I love just kind of, grabbing them randomly off the shelf and kind of just sifting through the pages, looking at old game reviews, and finding some hidden gems that maybe I never would have otherwise known of, and, picking up some of those games and also just reading some of their features. Well, one of the features that I came across I thought was an excellent idea for a video that I could do on my channel, and also kind of get a really nice discussion, maybe video response chain going on here in the community, because it's definitely an interesting topic and one that's very personal and unique to each gamer. So, the title of the article is Building the Perfect RPG. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys a quick snapshot of what they have here. And what they do is they kind of have different categories related to different RPGs. So they'll have like art direction and setting and hero, final boss, and all these different categories, which I found were really interesting to kind of go through and read some of these. And a lot of these games I haven't played, so it was really interesting to see, what games out of this list that I might want to play, but also kind of personal to me, what would I place in some of those categories. So for this video, and for all intents and purposes of time, I'm only going to pick three categories, some of which actually aren't even on here, but I think are very definitive of an RPG. So first off, I'm going to go through this article and kind of tell you guys what they chose, and then I'm going to go through my list of three categories specifying which RPG of mine that I've played relates to those categories. And then after this video, I open up comments, video responses, and everything of the sort, because I really want to get the community involved here, because this is a very interesting topic. And like I said, one that's so I'm going to kind of go quickly through this list, because I don't want to be, discussing this forever here. The hero that they chose for building the perfect RPG was in Lost Odyssey. His name is, Kame? I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right. I have Lost Odyssey, I've yet to play it. Final boss, Final Fantasy VI, or Final Fantasy III. I have not played Final Fantasy VI, I know that's ridiculous. But a very popular villain, a very well-known villain, Kefka, from that game, is who they chose. Party, they said Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, probably just because of, the level of customization in that game that you can have with your party. Conversation, Mass Effect, no surprise there. A BioWare game, you would figure, just the choices that you make in that game that make sense. World, Fallout 3, makes sense. Really interesting world. I couldn't get into that game. I think it really was the setting. That post-apocalyptic world set in DC. It just didn't really do anything for me. I'm more of an Oblivion, mythical, fantasy world, as opposed to the, modern day post-apocalyptic scene. Art direction, Odin Sphere, wonderfully drawn game. I believe Vanillaware does that. They did Dragon's Crown and Muramasa, the Demon Blade, and stuff like that. Story, Final Fantasy X, one I also have not played. Cutscenes, Xenosaga. Never got into that series. It just seemed too off-putting. I don't know. It just seemed way too complex for me. Humor, oh my gosh. If they gave it to any other game, I'd be disappointed. The Mario and Luigi series, that'd be the handheld series. So Superstar Saga on the Game Boy Advance, Partners in Time, Bowser's Inside Story on the DS, and then recently released Dream Team for the Nintendo 3DS, which I have not yet played, but those games really do incorporate some wonderful humor, just the interaction between characters and the little mini jokes, and the dialogue and writing especially is just hilarious. Cooperative Attacks, Chrono Trigger, there really are some unique attacks that you can kind of do with your characters. Timing, Shadow Hearts, so I'm assuming that's related to the the battle system. Strategy, the Persona series, that seems pretty fitting. And then Refill is another category from Chrono Cross, and Refill meaning that after battle your health and your probably MP automatically refills itself. And Final Fantasy 13 actually borrows from that game, because it does that in that game, which I really like, because it really is kind of off-putting to have to kind of go back to a save point or something, or use a bunch of potions right after a battle, as opposed to it just automatically filling up. It's very convenient. But those are the categories that they had. I'm going to be listing all of those in the description of this video below, so that if you want to choose from those specifically, you're more than welcome to do that in your comment or your video response if you choose to do that. But I picked 3 categories that really weren't on here, but I felt, again, were very definitive of what, an RPG is to me personally, and kind of the 3 defining things that I look for in an RPG, that if I don't see that within the first, 5 hours of playing, it probably isn't the RPG for me. So let's go ahead and see which 3 things I chose. Okay, so the first things first. An RPG has to suck me in with its battle system, because you're going to be doing that for the rest of the game, and RPGs are known primarily for their grinding. You're going to have to grind at some point in the game, and if the battle system isn't enjoyable, then that makes for a very tiring and kind of rough experience and not much fun. And Final Fantasy 13 did it right in so many ways, in my personal opinion. I loved the paradigm shifts. It just made the fighting mechanics so interesting, and it really kept me on the edge of your seat constantly. It wasn't just, button mashing. You really had to do a lot of strategy and stuff like that. So I really enjoyed the battle system in this, and this is a game that I plan to go back and maxing out my Crystarium on, because it's just so much fun. I love the battle system that much. That's going to be quite the time sucker, so it's going to be a while before I go back and do that, probably post-graduation, but it's something I do really would like. The next category I chose is music. Obviously, the music in the game, you're going to be hearing it throughout the entire game, through the battles, through, traversing the overworld, visiting towns and all of that. The music is something that really sticks with you. And a game, like games like, Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy IX, Final Fantasy 13, all of those games have wonderfully orchestrated soundtracks that really, when I hear the music, I can just see myself playing the game for the very first time. I remember where I was playing it, when I was playing it, who I was playing it with. It's crazy what music can really do. It really kind of sets you back in that original setting of playing the game. And for me, what's really interesting is that the game that I picked for this isn't a game I've actually even played, but a game that I have the soundtrack for, and it's unbelievable, guys, this soundtrack, and that is Chrono Cross. For those of you that have played the game, you're probably just like, oh yeah, oh my gosh, because it is insane. You start that soundtrack, and it is unbelievable. The Scars of Time, I had to write down the track, which is kind of pathetic, but the first track to that soundtrack is unreal. It starts off like really slow, and there's like this flute that's just playing, and it's really peaceful and slow, but then it starts to pick up, and it's just like super intense, and so well orchestrated. All this other instruments start coming into play, and it's just so awesome. And that's just telling of the rest of the entire soundtrack. It is so interesting and so well done, and it makes me that much more excited to actually play the game, because on the PS1 era, it's one of the RPGs that's held in very high regard, and I don't know if it's the spiritual successor or predecessor of Chrono Trigger, but I know the games are related in some way. But Chrono Cross is definitely one that I hope to play at some point, but the soundtrack especially is absolutely incredible, you guys. Definitely check it out if you have a chance. Alright, so the final category that I chose was story. You simply cannot get into an RPG or continue playing a game for 30 to 40 hours or even more if you're not, engrossed in the story. And for me, Final Fantasy IX does that perfectly. There's no other RPG that has sucked me in as much as Final Fantasy IX. From the music, the battle system, and the characters, everything was so well done and just came together so well. But the story in and of itself just completely engrossed me. And what's interesting is that I guess the story in and of itself isn't that interesting. I mean, it's kind of, I don't want to say cliche, but it's kind of a typical RPG where, you have Queen Braun, this crazy morbidly obese thing. I don't even think it's a woman. I don't even know what it is. but I'm pretty sure it's female. Queen Braun of Alexandria, she's hungry for power. She wants to start taking over neighboring nations and all this craziness. And out of concern, this guy named Sid, believe it or not, Sid in a Final Fantasy game, I know, crazy. He fears for Princess Garnet, the person who's kind of like under Queen Braun, and for her safety. So he hires a team of people, the Tantling Theater Trope or something like that. It's absolutely absurd. He hires this, band of people to go and capture or kidnap her in order to basically save her from this crazy Queen Braun lady. And so it just makes for like a whole bunch, a slew of crazy events that happen in the beginning of the game. And one of the main leaders of this, group of band of brothers, if you will, is Zidane, who's the main character, the main protagonist of the game that you're going to be controlling. And so they capture, Princess Garnet, and they are on this ship. And as they're leaving this town, Queen Braun has the ship shot down, and then you crash into this forest, and that's what kind of starts your journey. That's when you start, running into some of these other characters like Vivi, who's a very prominent and well-known character in the Final Fantasy universe, and just all these other different characters, and just the story itself. The graphics are very childish and kind of remind me of like, an early Disney or Pixar film. It's just such an interesting game, and one that is an absolute must-play for all RPG fans, if nothing else, for just the story, but also the music and the graphics and the setting and just everything. It really is just such a great RPG, and one of my personal favorites, especially for the story. So those are the three categories I chose: story, music, and battle system. What are yours? I'm going to go ahead and post the list of categories that Gameinformer had in their magazine, the link to this video below. Be sure to let me know, though, what you would choose and which RPGs that you've played would fit those, subsequent categories. Be sure to leave a comment or a video response, whichever you feel comfortable doing. But I think this is a great way to get the community kind of involved in this really interesting topic that, again, is very personal and unique to each gamer. And especially if you're a fan of RPGs, this is going to be a lot of fun. So I want to thank you guys for watching this video, and I'll see you.